Hey guys, tonight you step out of the bright buzzing present and into a ring of low flame, where sparks lift like tiny constellations, and the velvet dark presses close. The air smells of crushed grass and thin smoke. Somewhere beyond the glow, something with very confident teeth coughs to announce the night shift. Quick reality check: if you wander too far from this glow, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch beside a careful firethorn wood, arranged to crackle bright without wasting fuel, and feel its heat bead on your shins, lifting the day from your skin like steam from a river stone. The plain around you is a listening animal. Your pupils, glazed by the glow, shrink the world to a soft circle. Your ears, suddenly ambitious, lean into the dark for information. A low hum travels the ring to braid nerves together. Rhythm is a tool here, a metronome for patience. Hands stay quiet, eyes stay busy, because light is both shield and lure. The fire says we're awake. The dark says noted. Mainstream anchor. First, the stone by your heel is not just a stone. You lift a smooth river, cobble, angle it, and strike. A glassy flake jumps free, keen as a promise. Oldowan-style flakes like these appear in the archaeological record around 2.6 million years ago at places like Oldowan Gorge, evidence that hands and plans have been partners far longer than language has had time to brag. You test the edge carefully, the way a chef brushes a thumb along a knife, and file away the universal lesson of hunters' edges punish carelessness exactly once. Hyenas titter to the south, yes, giggle, and the sound taps your ribs like a knuckle. You feed the fire a twist of acacia and watch peppery sparks spiral up. A quirky tidbit to pocket after brush fires. Foragers sometimes sweep into the cooled black to gather roasted tubers and stunned insects. Nature's accidental cookout, the original pop-up restaurant. Opportunism is old, creativity even older. Joke one: you consider naming the coal you're tending power bank, then decide the brand deal isn't worth the hyena attention. You pinch a coal in a green stick fork and tuck it under a bark plate, because shepherding embers is easier than inventing new flame at dawn. The ember glows like a private moon, borrowed lightning you can carry. Around you, thorn branches lean inward so their spines present legal arguments to any curious snout. A deliberate gap serves as a doorway, not a weakness, a funnel. Habits stack into architecture without anyone drawing blueprints, and the circle you sit in is both room and promise. Historians still argue whether even this ring of glow and hush deserves to be called a camp so early or merely a favored patch beneath a thorn tree. Titles matter less than practice. 3 taps in the dust mean quiet. 2 mean look, 1 means move. You rehearse them without standing a pantomime of tomorrow's courage from the comfort of sitting the best kind of training. Another mainstream truth to keep close for a long slice of deep time people and predators shared kill sites. You likely scavenge as often as you hunt, arrowing toward vulture spirals by day and nosing into feline leftovers by dusk. It isn't glamorous, it's efficient. Bone cracks, marrow shines like candle wax, and the flake in your hand makes a tiny kiss sound as it bites cortex. You breathe through your nose and pass the alphabet of smells: dust, dung, crushed sage, the tinny note of blood somewhere far off. Landmarks file themselves into memory, the riverbank where clay prints every hoof and pad like pressed coins, the saddle on the ridge where the wind combs grass one way at noon and another at dusk. Termite mounds that stand like weathered statues and hold a faint earthy warmth at night. ground beacons for travelers who trust silhouettes more than constellations. A fringe-leaning whisper from a neighboring band says bending branches into shallow nests discourages crawling insects. Chimp cousins do it. Why not us? Maybe tonight you try a few fragrant leaves under the hip superstition and science holding hands. Another debate sidles up with the dark. Are you truly hunting yet, or still in the long apprenticeship? Some call energetic scavenging the stage where you follow opportunity rather than forcing it. Either way, tomorrow's plan stays elastic. If vultures begin to draw spirals, you follow the ink in the sky. If the fly buzz of a fresh kill writes a neon sign in your ear, you detour. Or you trace the soft parabola of gazelle prints to a waterhole and wait where the geometry of thirst funnels them. Hunting begins long before a chase, long before a throw. It begins with attention thick enough to catch the night's smallest syllables. Elders sketch routes with their fingers down the gully, where water lingers across the baked pan, where footprints write without ink up onto the ridge, where wind erases what you don't want others to read. You don't rehearse bravery, you rehearse awareness. Joke 2, you quietly invent stealth mode by walking as if you're carrying a full bowl of soup, no sloshing allowed. The group approves. The soup remains hypothetical, but delicious. A meteor scribbles itself across the sky, arrogant and brief. The youngest tries to catch it with both hands. The oldest squints like he's counting omens on a bone abacus. Practical lists hum under the poetry water wood, a safe exit if something big insists on the middle seat. To the north, zebra cough. To the west, a hippo performs a wet tuba solo. The night's soundtrack is a mixtape of things that can outrun you and things that can swallow you, but the fire's pulse keeps your heart on a friendly tempo. You study your flake and rehearse dawn. Rise at first bird rasp. Let your shadow stay small so hooves don't panic at geometry. Step where the ground is already broken, so your own story prints lightly. Picture an antelope line curving toward the river like a sentence searching for its period. If you're lucky, you'll find that period where the mud remembers the day. Joke 3, you promise the universe you'll stop calling antelope fast deer if it lets one trip just once. The universe declines to negotiate. The flame sighs into a red-eyed bed of coals. The dark is no longer a wall, it's a room with many doors. You count sparks instead of sheep, each a tiny rehearsal for the sunrise, waiting beyond the grass. Tomorrow will ask for lungs and legs, and the kind of patience that looks like stillness from far away. Tonight asks only that you listen until the ground begins its quiet dictation. When your eyelids sink, you do it the way the earliest hunters did, with a plan in your pocket, a coal for morning, and the sense that attention, humble, steady attention, is already half the hunt. Dawn lifts like a slow eyelid. The coals wear a faint orange grin, and the grass holds beads of night on every blade. You rise with the first rasping call, and let your feet remember the map you rehearsed in the dark. The world is grey and generous. Detail returns in layers, termite mounds first, then thorn silhouettes, then the clean punctuation of far hills. Overhead, a few vultures draw thin commas in the pale sky. They're not telling you where to go yet, only where to pay attention. You move as a group loosely strung like beads on a cord. No one walks alone, no one leads for long. Every few steps you stop, not because you're tired, but because the plain whispers better when you stand still. The wind slides over your skin and speaks from the north. You file that away. If something big lies ahead, you want the wind to carry your scent elsewhere, to deliver your news to the thorn trees instead of to a cat. Scavenging isn't laziness, it's math. A fresh kill can feed many bodies for the cost of a short sprint and a few cuts. Lions eat first, then hyenas, then jackals, then beetles, then time. If you arrive between one verse and the next, there's music left for you. The trick is timing. You don't aim for the feast's start that belongs to teeth designed like knives, but for the pause that follows when bellies are full and tempers are sleepy. In hot seasons that pause is longer, heat is your ally. You were born good at it. You sweat like a river of tiny logic, shed heat through skin instead of panting. Let the sun tire rivals while you keep going. The day that bakes others into shade is a road open just for you. The first real sign is not from the sky, but from your nose, a tinny iron smell that means something important opened recently. Then come flies, a sound like a shaken pouch of seeds. You slow down. The group thins into a crescent. A few climb a low rise for a look. A few melt into brush so that if something charges, not everyone is in the same place. You're not brave. You're careful. At the bottom of a shallow basin, the scene draws itself: trampled grass, scuffed dirt, claw skids. A small herd must have turned sharp at the last heartbeat, and the slowest paid for the curve. The carcass lies askew, ribs lifted like the frame of a broken hut. Your eyes read the leftovers. Blue flies own the air. A lion track overlaps a second lion track. Hyena prints stitch the mud like rough thread. The cats are gone for now, heavy-footed quiet, and the hyenas for once are elsewhere singing their bright, rude songs. This is your window. The first approach is a conversation with the ground. You test how the flies rise when you step. You listen for the soft churn of breath that would mean someone bigger than you still claims this place. Hearing nothing but the tap of wings and an irritated hornbill, you glide in. The oldest makes the first cut, not because age means authority here, but because he knows where to try first. His flake slides between skin and muscle like a whisper, not sawing but teasing, finding the path that was already there. Hideless, the world's inside smells louder. You breathe shallow and stay with the work. You don't take everything. You take wisely organs that spoil fast and feed best strips that dry well in the sun, the long limbs with the locked doors of bone that you've learned to open later with stone and patience. When you step back, you do it in the same order you arrived, eyes up, backs unpresented. No sudden motions that might wake something in the brush. Then you move away as a ripple meet high on long arms to beat blowflies, some pieces nestled in the cool fold of fresh leaves. Only when the basin shrinks behind you do you talk. Not with words, those will come later, but with looks and the easy rhythm of shared success. You are not the top of anything yet. You are a smart, in-between creature in a hot place full of sharp opinions. But every meal taken on the edge of risk teaches you a better edge. You learn where cats prefer to nap, which gullies do not echo footsteps, which birds scold lions but ignore you. The plain is a school with no walls. The tests are pass/fail and graded by hunger. Back at your thorn ring, the heat climbs. You hang strips of meat on green sticks near the coals to haze away some wetness and taste. Children drift nearer and then away like moths. You show them a safe edge from a safe distance. Small hands learn how to watch a knife without touching it. Someone laughs when a greedy fly lands on his nose. He goes cross-eyed, and the fly wins anyway. You eat the soft things first. You chew slowly. Let your jaw be a metronome. Let the day test you and find you steady. In the afternoon, the vultures write something bolder, full spirals now like a lazy staircase. You note the direction and the hour. Next time you'll arrive earlier. Scavenging becomes a practice, then a plan, then a habit, braided into identity. You develop little signals for when to speed up, when to fade into shadow, when to leave a place alone, because the vultures lied and the lie has teeth. If you are lucky, you carry a coal to that next place too, because flame makes even a small camp feel like a sentence with a period. Evening returns with a cooler breeze that smells of wet mud and fish river not far. You stretch your legs by walking down to drink where the bank remembers every visitor. You read the prints again, a refresher coarse zebra hippo cat, the delicate needles of guinea fowl, the clumsy splay of a warthog that didn't want to come but did. Your own tracks overlay yesterday's like a signature you're practicing. Night arrives and the plane rearranges. Eyes blink in the grass like scattered stars. You praise the thorn fence under your breath. You fall asleep with meat in your belly that was not yours this morning. It is not victory, it is practice. But practice is what turns a hand into a tool and a tool into tomorrow. A final note. The dark appreciates your way of surviving is social. Solitude on this plane is a short story. Together you have more eyes and more patience. Together you can take turns being brave for small distances, which adds up to safety for long ones. You close your eyes with that math warm in your chest and the taste of iron fading to something like gratitude. The fire breathes, you match it. The night keeps its many promises, and you keep yours up early. Eyes open, kind to heat, listening for wings. Morning again, and this time the lesson begins before you leave the ring of thorns. You squat over a bare patch of dirt with 2 stones in your hands, one heavy and confident, one smooth and full of potential. The heavy one is a hammerstone. The smooth one is raw material basalt, if you can get it quartzite, if not anything that will fracture cleanly when struck just right. You're not aiming to smash. You're aiming to persuade. You study the edges the way a potter studies the lip of a clay bowl. A good flake begins with a platform, a small, promising angle near the stone's edge. You set the angle with your eyes, and wrists bring the hammerstone across, not down, and let the force travel like a thought through the rock. The sound tells you if you were right. A dull thud means too soft. A ringing crack means the stone cooperated. When it does, a thin blade jumps free crescent bright with a bulb of percussion at its base, your signature in geology. You hold it as if it might shrug you off. Edges this new are eager. You test it on a reed, a strip of bark, then on what matters tendon and hide. Back at yesterday's basin you left plenty. Today the plan is to visit earlier and take what teeth can't. Hide slips under a sharp flake the way wet grass parts before a hand. A few quick passes free a joint. A few more separate muscle from bone with almost no tearing. You're not inventing sharpness. You're revealing a path that was already there. Disarticulation turns out to be a polite word for a practical gift. A shoulder blade coaxed loose carries meat like a tray you can lift with one hand. Ribs once unzipped become handles and packages at once. You learn to follow the white line of a tendon, the way you follow a track on dusty ground. All these pathways were present yesterday too. They just needed a better key. Bones you cannot eat, but they are larders locked by physics, and you've learned the combination. Back at camp, you make a small stage of stone, an anvil sunk into the dirt, so the force has nowhere to go but through the bone. You place a long limb segment across it, mind your fingers, and bring the hammerstone down with accuracy, softened by rhythm. The first blow rings, the second sings, the third opens a milk-white secret. Spiral fractures peel away in clean arcs, and the marrow-rich pale shy presents itself like a candle wick. You don't rush. A thin stick serves as a scoop. A green reed makes a perfect straw. Children get the first taste because their eyes are the world's best applause. Elders get the next because tomorrow depends on yesterday's teacher's waking well. You take your portion and feel the quiet lift it gives. Meat fills, fat fuels. In lean times, marrow is a promise that keeps you thinking. The plane respects thinkers who can also run. Some bones you roast near the coals before cracking, not to cook. The marrow fat doesn't ask for much, but to loosen the tight interior to persuade stiffness into generosity. The smell is deep and calm, like rain on dust. Flies mind their own business for once. You make a small joke to yourself, the first soup was a closed bone. Tools multiply. A broken flake becomes a scraper, a long, slender one, a needle for teasing sinew strands into cord. A battered hammerstone used all day discovers it is also a grinder seed against stone bone, against grit, pigment against rock. Your hands begin to speak a new language of pressure and angle, and the camp fills with the soft percussion of becoming. With edges, you can do more than eat. You can store. Strips cut thin dry faster and safer. A sling of leather cut to shape carries a water-smoothed pebble that remembers coolness even at noon. You trim hide into laces that bind branch to branch for a windbreak. Each small improvement is modest. Together they are climate armor. Harsh becomes manageable. Unpredictable becomes scheduled. You notice too how tools change time. Without flakes, a carcass is an hour of frantic pulling and chewing, and you leave too much for others. With flakes, the same carcass is 20 minutes of precise decisions and a tidy departure. That time goes to shade, to storytelling, to fixing a scrape, to teaching a child how to place fingers safely on a stone's dull back. Safety isn't a single act. It's the accumulation of small, boring choices. You pay attention to edges the way you pay attention to the sky. A flake that dulled on hide finds a second life on wood. A piece that chipped wrong becomes a striker for tinder. You learn to rest your tools like sleeping animals, edges up and away, never where a foot will learn their lesson. When you move camp, the toolkit moves as a flock bundled in hide, each piece known by touch. By evening, your hands carry a day's worth of quiet victories. You've turned risk into routine hunger, into choreography. The plain hasn't changed its heat, its predators, its sudden gifts, but you have a little. Your attention has edges now, too. You notice the faintest tilt of a vulture's wing. You hear the different kinds of fly. You read bone for what it will give you before you ask. Fire gives a soft nod when you sit. You set a few ribs over the coals, not to blacken, just to whisper smoke into the fat. Someone hums. Someone else taps a rhythm on a thigh bone, thinking. You look at the flake that worked best today and set it aside not on the ground but on a flat stone. Respect is also storage. The night cools quickly. You pull a hide across your shoulders and feel the way it holds the day's warmth. Tomorrow has more lessons you know. There are waterholes to study, winds to map, seasons to predict. But for now, a full belly and a neat cluster of tools make the darkness kind. You sleep with the marrow's steady heat in your chest, and a thin smile on your hands' edges wrapped in leaf and leather, like dreams you can hold without bleeding. The sun climbs unblinking and blunt. It is not your enemy. It's your quiet ally. The partner that turns the plain into a long, slow contest you were built to pass. You eat lightly, nothing that sloshes, and rub a thin film of damp clay on the bridge of your nose and along your shoulders. Shade will be rare at noon. You make your own in layers of mud, patience, and plan. Someone ties a small water sling, dried hide, sealed with pitch across your chest. In later ages, people will carry water in eggshells. For now, any pouch that doesn't leak is a miracle. You begin at talking pace, a loose line aimed upwind, so your scent trails behind like an obedient thought. You're not chasing yet. You're assembling a sentence, the where, the who, the how, tired. Hoofprints sketch fresh stories over yesterday's. A light chip on a pebble means a hurried step. Crisp edges mean recent. Dust fallen into a track means old. Droppings that still glisten speak of minutes. Ones sunk into their own soft shadow speak of hours. The herd's arcs lean toward a thorn thicket, then away from gnats, then toward the low, dark promise of a pan. You read it all without breaking your rhythm. Your choice is never the fastest animal. You pick the one the morning already picked out for you, a limp you can barely see until you see it everywhere, a stride that measures shorter, a tail that flicks too often at flies, because the blood is sweet where it shouldn't be. You do not hate this animal. You enter into a hard conversation with it. The goal isn't speed. The goal is temperature. You trot as if carrying a bowl full of water, quiet, steady, no slosh. Your spine stays soft, your head held by an invisible strap, the neutral ligament that keeps it from pitching when your feet drum. Your arms swing like metronomes to balance the long levers of your legs. Under your heel and arch tendons store and release energy like small springs. Behind you, the gluteus that humans made large for running holds your posture upright. The genius is not in one muscle, though. It's in the whole arrangement and the open faucet skin that pours heat into the air. You sweat everywhere. Your rival does not. When it sprints, it must pant. When it pants, it must slow. You don't. The first flush is almost polite. You let the herd see you from far enough that panic runs downhill, not into you, not into a lion's mystery, just away. They bolt, then drift, then stop to listen. You don't sprint. You keep the same boring, relentless pace, the tempo of a drum you can beat all day. The one you've chosen wavers at the edge of the group, then folds into scrub to blow like a bellows. You appear again calm as a shadow that knows the hour. It bolts again. You follow. You run with a team, but not in a clump. Two of you arc wide to keep the animal moving when it tries to dive into thick cover. One hangs back to watch the general line so you don't push it into a dangerous gully or toward a sleeping cat. Tools of the day is wind the long clock of noon. From time to time you trade places, a gentle relay with no baton but a look. No heroics, only duty-changing hands before it gets slippery. Heat makes the plain a lens that lies. Far water becomes near, near shade becomes far. You correct for mirage by looking at what cannot pretend the dark mark where hooves hit mud, the small cloud of dust that refuses to be a bush. Your breath lives in your nose, in and out, low and quiet. Mouth breathing is there when you need it, for now you let your tongue rest behind your teeth so your mouth does not turn to bark. You don't count steps. You count small checkpoints, that low anthill, that three-fingered acacia, that bare rock where lizards blink like coins. By the second hour, the herd has left your animal behind. It knows you now the way a river knows a persistent stone. It veers toward a wind-scoured hollow where breezes might soothe its furnace. You are wind with feet. It slows to pant. You close enough to be a suggestion. It chooses to rise and go again. This is the bargain you ask for motion, until motion costs more heat than the world can accept. Heat is a currency. Today you are rich. There are rules that make this hunt honest and survivable. You do not run where tall grass whispers of cats. You do not crest a ridge in silhouette. You do not let the animal circle back through the thickest shade and vanish into the ink where all stories become claw marks. When you doubt, you stop not to rest, but to listen. The day has a heartbeat. You match it. If the wind changes and carries your scent ahead, you swing wide, because surprise is a small knife that cuts your own feet first. Your soles know the plain the way a tongue knows a tooth. They are thick where they should be tender, where sensation saves you from thorn and fang. Sometimes you wrap them in braided bark, sometimes in hide, sometimes in nothing at all. When a thorn wins, you stop long enough to pluck it and grin at the lesson. Look 2 steps out, not 1. You drink when the air tells you to little mouthfuls more often than pride prefers. You pinch a bit of salt from a soot-stained leaf pouch onto your tongue. Sweat is water leaving. Salt reminds water how to stay. By midday, the animal's sprint has shortened into a ragged trot. It tries genius standing in a shallow pool to cool legs that are not the problem. You don't argue. You wait until the shiver under its skin becomes obvious, until its chest heaves so high the ribs write a desperate story. When it moves, it does so reluctantly, a small, gallant effort that would be admirable if it were not also lunch. You are close now, close enough to hear the wet click in its throat, close enough to see the black sheen on its nose. You feel a twin ache that is not pity and not cruelty, something like respect braided to purpose. The end is tasteful and quick. You do not celebrate, you complete. The finish is the quiet part of a long song. In another section of your life, you will use shaped wood and stone lashed with sinew. For now, you rely on what the day already put in your hands. You thank the animal with the only honesty that exists on a plane like this use. Meat for many mouths, skin for shade, sinew for cord, bones for tomorrow, fat for the small, bright engine inside your chest. On the walk back, you are not tired so much as emptied and refilled with something steadier than excitement. The heat that tried to bend you into shade became your hinge. You stayed open. You talk a little now, real words, half-sung jokes. Someone improvises a tune using your footfalls as percussion. Another points out a cloud that looks like a hippo. Everyone agrees to keep it that way because hippos are plenty without the sky's help. At camp, water has been warmed in the sun. It tastes like branches and thanks. Strips hang and smoke. Children count your steps with a game you didn't know they were playing. They hid small pebbles at intervals on the path and retrieve them now, shouting numbers as if telling beads. An elder nods at the animal, then at your pacing form, then at the sun. He has seen this many times. It never gets less miraculous that a soft, hair-sparse creature can wear a running sky on its skin and arrive with a feast. Night brings cool forgiveness. Breezes knead the day out of your calves. You rub smoke into small cuts and listen to the fire's slow arithmetic. Today's lesson was not that you are the fastest. You aren't. It was that your design and your stubbornness make you a different kind of predator, one that wins by turning time and heat into tools. You fall asleep hearing your own measured cadence inside the crackle, the long drum that started at dawn and will be there again tomorrow if you ask it to be. Dawn spreads a pale hush across the plain, and you step into it as if into a library that opens only in low light. The shelves are made of dust mud, dew-dark grass. Every page is a print. The trick is not to find tracks the world is lousy with them, but to hear the conversation they're having with each other and with the morning. You begin by softening your eyes. Hard eyes miss soft signs. You let focus widen until details arrive without being chased. They're gazelle slots splayed at the tips from yesterday's panic. Here warthog crescents pressed deep edges crumbled from a lazy trot after rain. A small highway of guinea fowl needles crosses everything. The punctuation that tells you this chapter is recent. You don't follow any one line yet. You absorb. A good tracker reads both the mark and the material that took it. Sand lies, clay exaggerates, dust forgets quickly, unless dew fixes it for one grateful hour. You measure freshness by edge, crispness by the way a print still holds its tiny ridges, by whether a beetle has stitched a seam across it. One trick you learned from a careful aunt: kneel and touch the print's floor with the back of your fingers. If it is cooler than the ground around it, the air has only just resumed ownership. If it is the same, the story is older than your thirst. You listen too. Birds are honest narrators when you learn their gossip. Drongos scold at snakes, francolins shout headline alarms at almost anything. Oxpeckers tattle on large herbivores with their fussy clicks. When a patch of silence falls where there should be chatter, you consider the shape of silence and what might be wearing it. A jackal's flat bark marks impatience. A distant chorus of hyenas marks an argument over a bone you might finish later. Even flies have dialects, one buzz for dung, one for meat, and one that means do not stick your face in there unless you like surprises. Now the spore you want shows itself fresh, narrow-hoofed, the measured script of a small antelope. The stride is even the depth light, the toes tight at the tips. Not alarmed, not limping, not old. A bead of dung shines like wet fruit beside the path. You could time it by its skin. You mark the wind with a pinch of dust from your wrist crease. It drifts toward your cheek. Good. You will be behind the news you're reading, not ahead of it. You don't plant your feet, you place them. Step on the bruises the last walker left, or on hard stones, or on grass already bent. Heel down softly, roll through lift before the ground remembers you too clearly. Your shadow stays short, your shoulders stay loose. When the spore enters low scrub, you don't widen your elbows like wings. You fold them in so leaves slide by without announcing you. The story of gait unfolds at your ankles. A relaxed animal writes regular commas, left, right, each the same length. An anxious one adds exclamation points, longer strides, deeper hits, toes digging in. When the prints angle to a waterhole, you look for the little detours that tell of browsing, nipped leaves, tugged grass. A seed head knocked sideways. Fresh dew shaken from grass tells you you're minutes behind, not hours. Pressure releases the small breaks at the edge of a print where weight rolled off tell you direction, even when sand has tried to blur it. A scuffed twig points the same way a tail brushed a leaf. A spiderweb, freshly torn, hangs its silk in the direction of travel. None of these signs is decisive alone. All of them together are a choir. You nod along to their timing and let your legs keep the tempo. You stop often, not because you're lost, but because stopping is how you stay found. A tracker who never pauses chases their own certainty into error. You kneel, draw a line with a stick from the last clear print to where you expect the next should be, then search that corridor first. When the ground becomes a liar. Gravel that won't take a mark, you widen your circle, looking for transfer, a smear on a stone, a seed pressed into a crease in the dirt, the faintest polish on a bark where a flank slid by. You think of it as skipping tracks the story leaps. You leap with it, but you don't skip the patience. Children practice beside you, each with a small mystery assigned. Find me one leaf bitten today, not yesterday. They bring back a green, ragged edge with sap still shining. You grin without looking away from the ground. Praise is part of the map. It keeps small eyes open. An elder hums a low note when the spore splits one animal to the right, two to the left. He lifts his chin at the right-hand path, and you follow because you're after a single careful body, not a pair that might pinch you between thickets. At a narrow gully, the prints change character. The steps shorten. The toes dig. The slope was steep enough to ask for work. On the far side, the first two prints are deeper, an animal launching itself back into comfort. The dew here is still broken into bright beads by those steps. Your heart notes the time. You raise your head just enough to let your ears drink the space. Somewhere ahead, a single stone ticks as it settles just once, as if remembering a hoof. You wait long enough for waiting to matter. Then you move. Not every tracking ends in a chase. Sometimes it ends in knowledge you cache later. You find the bedsite pressed grass in an oval, a faint warm smell still caught in the cool. You kneel and touch the hollow. Your fingers learn its heat. You don't lie in that bed. You circle it, memorize which way the wind would have entered, which view the animal chose, down a slope across a path toward a patch of sky not busy with vultures. Tomorrow, if you need to come early and wait, you will know where to be. That isn't where a cat wants you. Your kit for listening to land is humble. A small stick for drawing a pouch for a few pebbles. You'll drop as memory knots a flake for trimming a twig into a probe, a water sling for long thinking. Some trackers carry a memory song, a tune whose verses map landmarks, termite tower, split acacia, red rock, like a hippo. You hum your map under your breath so your feet don't wander when your thoughts do. By midday, the spoor leads to a grove where shade thinks it's clever. Shade is often a magician's sleeve. Things disappear into it with a flourish. You do not walk straight in. You skirt the edge to read the exits first. Where do prints leave? How high are branches polished by backs? Where do birds sit without anxiety? A pair of doves preen unconcerned. A starling flicks its tail and minds its own business. Safe enough, but still you go in slow feet, choosing the silent spots. Sand patches bare earth roots you can ride like bridges. You don't flush the animal now. The heat isn't on your side at this hour. Persistence belongs to mornings. You mark the place with a mental notch, 2 termite mounds like sleeping buffalo. One tree with a scar, a boulder that looks like it's swallowing the ground. You back out the way you came so your scent trail doesn't become a circle that ties your ankles at dusk. You leave nothing but a question in the dust that only you can answer later. On your way back, you practice reading the minor literature of the plain. Ant roads detour around a pebble someone kicked this morning. A line of tiny lizard toes ends at a soft V where wings picked up a body. Beetle drags cross your own footprints, confirming who is more recent. It's not paranoia, it's conversation. You are not alone here, and the more you hear, the less you have to guess. Evening brings the gentle court where evidence meets story. Around the fire you draw the day in, ash, the gully, the bed site, the stand of trees with the good sight line. Others add their notes. Someone saw dust lift in a ribbon at noon from that very grove. Someone else found a shed horn near the river bend that tells of last season's fights. The map becomes communal, a brain bigger than any skull stored in smoke and memory. You fall asleep with your eyes still soft, the world's script still unrolling behind your lids. Tomorrow you might run. Tomorrow you might scavenge. Tomorrow you might simply watch. Tracking is all three at once, a way of listening that turns land into language and language into lunch. You dream in pressure releases and dew-bright edges in bird scolds and beetle stitches. When the night wind shifts across the thorn fence, you wake just enough to feel it on your cheek and smile. The library changed floors. You still have the key. Morning brings a problem shaped like possibility your arms end too soon. Teeth and claws borrowed from the storehouse of evolution are not available at your kiosk, so you grow a longer arm from wood. You start with the world's simplest inspection. You sight down a sapling the way a navigator sights a star. If the line wobbles, you turn the sapling and check again. A good shaft doesn't argue with your eye. You choose dense, springy wood that forgives mistakes, straight-grained, not too heavy, not so light that it remembers every breeze more than your hand. Bark peels in long ribbons. You twist them into ties because waste makes camp smaller. Green wood lies about straightness. You correct it with heat and patience. Over a bed of coals, not flame, you warm a section until it yields like stiff leather. You bend gently across your knee, hold breathe, and let the grain learn your preference. A dozen small heats, a dozen small bends. The stick becomes a line that listens. You rub the shaft with fat and ash to seal its skin, then polish it with a smooth stone until it slides like river water through your grip. Point first, though, the word point is more a verb than a noun. For a simple thrusting spear, you carve the tip to a long, patient taper, the kind that enters without splitting. Fire hardening isn't cooking, it's a conversation. You introduce the tip to warmth until the surface browns shyly, then scrape off the char to reveal a tighter, glassier grain beneath. Too much heat makes the wood brittle. The spear becomes a brag with a short career. Just enough turns it serious. Some days you go further and give the spear a tooth of stone. You choose a flake with a leaf shape and persuade it into symmetry. Pressure flaking along both edges with a deer bone or a stout thorn nibbling it into a tidy, thin triangle with a gentle waist. You blunt the base so it won't cut its own bindings, then cut 2 neat notches. Glue is a grand word for a humble miracle tree resin softened near coals, thickened with wood ash, made flexible with a breath of beeswax if luck and bees favor you. You bed the point in glue lash with wet sinew and watch the cord tighten as it dries, turning fiber into stone's loyal friend. Balance matters. You rest the spear across a finger and shuffle along the shaft until it floats level. A hair forward of center makes the point eager. Too far back makes the tail wag. You mark the sweet place with a shallow ring cut by a dull flake, your hand's home. A second rougher patch becomes the thinking spot where your fingers go when you pause to decide. Now you train because honesty lives in practice. A thrusting spear is not thrown. It is delivered. You learn to hold it so the back hand is engine and the front hand is rudder. Your feet become the other half of the weapon. Lead foot planted back, foot sliding in with the push. So the point is a straight continuation of your intention. You work against targets that cannot bleed termite mounds. Old stumps, a suspended bundle of reeds, so that errors cost only pride and blisters. Group choreography turns a stick into a plan. At a waterhole, you don't stroll in as if shopping. You set people where the geometry is on your side, 2 quiet shadows in reeds downwind, 1 watcher high on a bank to read the whole sentence of motion, 1 patience specialist on the most likely escape line. The goal isn't to paint the water red. The goal is order. A clean thrust ends arguments quickly. A second spear stands by to finish what mercy and necessity agree upon. The first rule is also the last. Nobody gets hurt on your side if care can prevent it. Spears change the night, too. You slide points upright into a ground rack just inside the thorn ring, tips up, but not at eye height. Children learn points sleep up. The way they learn where the fire is hot, even when it looks like a bed of rubies. A spear laid on the ground becomes an accident rehearsing. A spear stored like a tall, alert animal becomes furniture with a job. Craft gathers specialists even if no one wears a badge. Someone in your band hears shafts better than others taps them. Listens for the hollow that means a hidden knot, discards the subtle liar before the hunt has a chance to do it for you. Someone's glue never fails even in damp. Someone else can talk a dull flake into a sharp leaf faster than anyone. You trade time as currency. A morning making bindings earns you a seat on the easy side of the drive this evening. Fairness is a cord you retie daily. You learn the quiet math of reach. With a spear you can ask a dangerous body to stay an arm and a half farther away than your courage alone could manage. You don't become fearless. You become correctly fearful, which is another way of saying competent. Cats still own the dark. Buffalo still own their tempers. But between you and trouble there is now a straight line that answers back. A good spear becomes a biography. Nicks along the shaft mark stories, this from the day the warthog swerved, this from the thorn thicket with the hidden rock. You wrap the grip with dried sinew where your palm tends to blister. You slide a thin leather ring onto the butt so it won't slick out of wet hands. If it warps in rain, you warm it and remind it who makes decisions here. It obeys mostly because you are consistent. Practice becomes ritual, and ritual becomes calm. At dusk, you and 2 others take turns walking a slow figure 8 just outside the thorn fence, spear held low but ready, listening for the dishonest hush that means something bigger than you is practicing too. You don't poke the dark. You let the dark bump into the fact that you have a plan. Some nights you lean the spear within easy reach and sleep with a hand on the shaft. In dreams, it grows lighter. Flies farther leaves your fingers and returns. You don't know it yet, but your dreams are walking toward a hook of wood that will cast spears like fishing line casts flies. For now, the line between your shoulder and the point is enough. The stick has become an extension of patience and a long subtraction of distance from danger. In the morning, when you lift the spear and test its balance with a one-handed toss and catch your wrist smiles. An honest tool teaches your body where to be without asking your mind to chatter about it. You've lengthened your arm and with it the size of the circle where your people can eat and sleep without apology. Not bad for a straightened branch, a handful of resin, and a stubborn lesson in where to put your feet. Fire is not a pet, not a god, not a toy. It is a guest with bright manners and complicated moods. You court it with respect and carry it like gossip that can save a life or end a village. When it stays, it changes everything. You've already learned to shepherd coals, green stick tongs, bark plate ember like a private moon. Today you learn fire's other faces. Cooking is the obvious one roots that once fought your teeth surrender into sweetness. Sinew-stiff meat relaxes into something your jaw can love without working like a millstone. You don't need words like gelatin to know that long heat turns tough into tender and that your belly negotiates better with the plain when meals arrive pre-softened. A pile of stones becomes a stove. You heat palm-sized rocks until they whisper, and then drop them hissing into a hide-lined pit of water to make the first soups. Bubbles speak the plain's oldest lullaby. You add shavings of meat, slivers of tuber, a handful of leaves that an aunt swears by. The broth steals flavors the way the wind steals scents, kindly, thoroughly. Children sip and look briefly wise. Smoke, too, is a tool, a thin grey knife that cuts time. You hang meat where smoke braids through it, and it asks less from the flies. You smudge the sleeping ground so biting insects lose interest in your blood and negotiate with the air instead. Ash cools small stings, polishes teeth, softens hides. A finger dipped in ash, and fat draws waterproof seams on roofs of grass and leaf. Fire is a pantry of side effects. It is also a lever for the land itself. In the dry season, with a watching wind and a careful line of adults, you lay a cool, crawling fire along the grass's tired edge. It moves like a slow thought, eating old stems, dodging green, making a black ribbon that future rain will write with bright growth. You do not make rings that trap. You make lines that guide. Sometimes you borrow that moving edge to press small game toward nets or quiet hands. The rule is iron burn small early and on purpose, or the plane will show you how big, late, and accidental feels. Glue learned fire. So did stone. Heat cracks a stubborn boulder along the seam your flake wanted to follow. A splash of water mid-heat persuades the break to be sudden and useful. Resin finds its best self near coals, not flames soft enough to shape, not runny enough to run. Pitch drips from a smoldering bark roll like slow, dark honey. You catch it on a pebble and smile at its loyalty when it cools. On the spear tip, glue and sinew sing harmony. Fire bends time indoors as well as out. Night no longer slams shut. It slopes. In that gentle decline, you can mend a binding rub, a shaft smooth, teach a child that coals glow long after flames have gone to bed. The circle of light is a classroom, a clinic, a court. Stories lengthen at the same rate shadows do. Someone draws a map in charcoal on a flat stone, 2 termite mounds, a water path, a wide place in the reeds. Plans are better by fire because eyes are together and feet are at rest. You learn the rituals that keep the guest well behaved. Clear the ground to mineral before you lay the first spark. Stack fuel like ideas, small to big, with a path for air. Keep a pot of sand and a green bough within reach to smother a braggy flame. Leave a gap in the thorn fence that is not a door for teeth, but a draught for smoke to escape. When you leave, the last act is not walking away. It is stirring the coals into a dead grey truth with water and ash. A fire that looks asleep wakes fast in the dark wind. The making of flame when you have none is an art you treat like rain magic. Some days a spark from stone iron-rich nodules kissing hard rock catches dry fungus and grows. Some days friction obeys the stubborner spindle twirled in a fireboard's notch with a bowstring until brown powder smokes a coal blinking in the dust like a newborn eye. It is not quick until it is practiced, and you practice because the world only partly belongs to your ember bundle. You hedge bets in a place that loves hungry surprises. Fire changes your body quietly. Warm food takes less time to chew. The hours your jaw would have spent arguing with roots and rinds relax into other tasks. Tool-making, storytelling, simply watching the sky rehearse tomorrow's weather. Warmth allows you to sleep deeply when wind would have rattled bone. Deep sleep lets healing run full programs. Light at night lets elders step into the same room as children's attention. Knowledge stops dying with old teeth and starts traveling in sentences. It makes you brave where you should be and humble where you must be. A torch pressed into evening tells eyes in the grass that you are bigger than your outline. A ring of coals says to hyenas, "Find an easier joke." Yet fire also teaches borders. You do not walk far with a torch in tall, dry grass. You do not sleep with flames licking high while the wind gets ideas. You do not leave coals at a camp you plan to revisit after the first big wind of the season, because mischief travels. Charcoal stains your fingertips, then everything your fingertips touch. Soon your spear shafts wear small black signatures. Your cheeks sometimes do too, when you scratch an itch and forget. Someone smears a finger's worth along a rock and drags a line that looks like the back of a running animal. Everyone laughs at how right it feels. You don't know it yet, but fire has just opened a door between your eye and your hand that a future wall will gladly accept. On honey days, smoke makes bees polite. A smoldering twist of grass waved slow convinces the buzzing city to treat your trespass as weather, not war. You work quick, replace broken comb with a gift of quiet, and leave with sweetness enough to make the whole camp hum. Wax from the same raid makes glue a little kinder. Wrap string against rot, shines a child's carved toy to a soft glow. Nothing is only one thing once fire has visited it. Night returns. You bank the coals into a small red country and pull the dust blanket over part of it, so morning will have a warm place to begin. Beyond the ring, the dark breathes large animals into and out of existence. Inside, the air smells of smoke and fat and a good day. Someone sings nonsense to a baby. The baby chooses to believe it. Someone else adds a stick and watches the flames rehearse the faces of people you miss and people you haven't met. Fire gives you time, and you spend it on each other. Before sleep, you do the gesture you've learned not to skip. You touch the ember bundle hidden in its pocket of punky wood and bark. It is still warm. Tomorrow it will be a morning. If rain comes and scolds everything cold, you will know how to start from nothing. You have borrowed power, and you have paid it back with care. The guest is content. The night nods. You close your eyes with heat on your shins and a coal the size of a thumb holding the promise of breakfast. At first you think the eyes at the edge of the fire are only eyes amber coins minted by the night and spent by curiosity. They flicker, vanish, reappear a little closer. A shape settles against the dark, slim, long-legged ears like leaves that pay attention to wind. A wolf, though you don't have that word yet. You have the word for listener, the word for shadow that warns the word for not cat. You toss a wrist-thick rib end into the circle's unclaimed corner and look away as if bored. The shadow's paws are careful thunder. The rib disappears. For weeks it's this. They trail your day, audit your leftovers, and sing from hills like they are counting stars out loud. You are wary then, amused, then interested in how interest turns into routine. One evening a pair comes nearer than custom permits and doesn't flee when a child coughs. You see hip bones like handles under their hides hunger with posture. You are not a saint. You're a planner. You flick a strip of meat toward a patch of ground where the wind carries scent outward, a place you can also see without craning. The shadow takes the strip and leaves you the story of its tracks as thanks. Reciprocity grows in small trades. Their noses bring you news your eyes would have missed. Dust lifted by distant hooves the instant a cat erases bird song. Your scraps buy an alarm system that runs on smell and sleeps lightly. When hyenas arc too near the thorn fence, your knotcats line the edge and growl in a pitch that makes the night reconsider its options. You sleep deeper under that sound than you did under silence. Nothing announces the pact. It thickens like soup on a slow fire. A young one limps in one dawn, 3 good legs and one that tries. You are moving in 20 heartbeats, a loop of cord, a stick. To pin the shoulder, calm hands a poultice. The pup whines once, then watches your face like a student who will remember this lesson longer than you do. You feed it soft, and when it wakes to itself again, it wakes in the circle, not beyond it. It chooses to stay. Choice is a bell you can't unring. Hunting changes when the shadows become partners. The first upgrade is not speed, but information. Wolf noses read wind like scripture. They trace the braid of scent strands your mouth can barely taste. A tail stiffens. You learn the chapter's subject before you see the first track. You start naming breezes by what they tell your companions. River-breathed wind, dust-breathed wind, cat-breathed wind. You never go upwind into a thicket without watching a pair of ears write their opinion across the air. Then comes choreography. On the open plain, you and the wolves become a comb that teases a herd's edge into a snag. Your throwers drift left, their fastest drift right. Your patient runners hold the line at the back. Their small, bold ones rush the bush where a quick mind tries to vanish. Spoken words aren't fast enough for this in its best moments. You invent hand signs without meaning to a fist to freeze 2 fingers, to split a palm, to press and hold. The wolves read your shoulders. You read their tales. You learn the boundaries that keep a gift from becoming a mistake. Never crowd a mother. Never corner a boar. Never promise a share. And then renege because pride got noisy. Wolves forgive once when your throw flies long, and they do the dangerous part. They do not forget a pattern. You make your pattern a good one. First pick goes to the sharp teeth that risked more distance, next to elders who risk far in old ways. Children last but not least. Wolves begin to wait a polite heartbeat for the toss they've learned will come. A heartbeat is a rope of trust. Night politics adjust too. A wolf's growl works on hyenas only to a degree. Hyenas are lawyers with jawbones. But a chorus of wolves and human shouts convinces even a hopeful scavenger that this camp is expensive. Jackals still fence it, but with better manners. Your torch becomes half as necessary and twice as ceremonial. You hold it anyway because light tastes good in a mouth that remembers old dark. Pups become a curriculum. They gnaw everything that isn't rock test boundaries like ropes and sink into sleep with the complete faith of small animals welcomed where they could have been chased. Children and pups invent games that look like chaos and are actually training chasing without biting, stealing without keeping, announcing without panicking. The pups learn your voices, the children learn the syntax of ears and tails. You are teaching each other how to read a species. Song changes too. You already sing to carry time across dark valleys. Now a second choir joins on a hill, and their harmonies feel like an answer to a question you didn't know to ask. Their howls map distance in a precise geometry. One voice here, one there, echo shaped by ridge, a third down in the draw. You close your eyes and see the land in sound. You add your voice and your chest vibrates in a way that seems to shake dust off old kinds of fear. Tools adjust to new possibilities. A thrusting spear remains a close-lettered argument. A thrown spear, or later a dart, becomes a punctuation mark you place where a wolf nudges an opportunity into the open. You keep a cache of light shafts for the moments when a sprinting target breaks a line at just the right distance. Your throws get cleaner because you are no longer throwing at a guess. You are throwing at a stage cue. Not every wolf stays. Wildness has its own calendar. Some visit as clients, not colleagues. Some take a share and take their leave. You let them. The pact is not a cage, but a few bloodlines learn your fire's smell as the smell of dinner safety and jobs to do. Their paws grow used to thorn. Their courage calibrates to your rhythm. Their pups arrive already keyed to the frequency of human laughter. Their faces tilt when you speak. Your hand finds their brows without thinking. An animal goes from the to this one, from shadow to name. One afternoon, a storm writes grey curtains across the hills. Herds bunch, cats vanish into folded grass. You wait under a rock ledge with 3 of your companions, 2 human, 1 4-legged, sharing a dry sandwich of air in the rain. The wolf leans into your knee like a question and sighs. You scratch behind a damp ear and feel the ancient hinge turn again, the one that swung when the first coal came home in bark and changed the night. Fire taught you how to lengthen time. Partnership teaches you how to widen it. At dusk, the rain breaks into coins that bounce from leaves. You walk home through a smell like new words. The pups burst the fence line like laughter. One tumbles rights itself and aims for your ankles as if you were a hill. You feign defeat because joy is a kind of strength. Meat smokes. A nose twitches to check the menu. You toss a strip to the edge of the light and another strip after it like commas. The eyes that once hovered at the perimeter now sit just inside where they can see your hands without squinting. You don't call them pets. You call them what they are, partners who chose you back. You sleep with warm breath pooling at your feet, and the plane's alarms outside your circle shifted onto other shoulders. Somewhere in the dark, a song starts that is not quite yours and not entirely theirs. You add a line, then another, until the night knows your camp by sound as well as by smoke. Companionship is a tool as sharp as any flake. You turn it in the firelight and feel its edge. The plain is a long lesson. The coast is a different book. You arrive at water that never holds still and learn to read a clock made of sky. The moon becomes your quiet teacher, pulling whole oceans like a blanket, laying bare gardens twice a day. You time your steps to that breathing out, in, reveal, erase. Low tide makes a city of shallow pools, each its own market stall. Barnacled stones wear crowns of weed. Anemones close like purses when the wind sniffs too hard. Small fish flicker in bowls of glass, forgetting for a moment how big the world is. You move slowly because a slick rock is a teacher with no patience. Feet find purchase on ripples frozen into stone, on mats of short, stubborn algae on sand that packs like fresh dough under your heels. The air tastes of iron and salt, and a bright, clean hunger. Shellfish don't run, but they hide well. You look for the faint siphon holes of clams, the zipper line where a mussel cluster meets rock, the snail's runes, silver scribbles on a stone where algae turned into lunch. A short stick becomes a lever, a bone wedge becomes a key. You work along the seam where mussel meets rock, not to rip but to persuade. Mussels come free with a quiet pop. Limpets, if you're quick and kind to angles, surrender before they can glue down. Your basket fills with patient food that waits for heat like a polite guest. Crabs require timing and a willingness to be pinched. You learn the two-hand dance one, to distract one to lift from behind thumbs on the carapace, like a lid on a pot with opinions. Eels hide under rocks like question marks. You coax them into a net bag and thank them with a swift decision. Children become champions of small harvests, tiny shrimp flicking into reed scoops, periwinkles encouraged into leaf cones, seaweed cut with a shell knife from the thickest green waves. No one goes hungry on a good tide. On a great tide, you sing. You build traps that let the water do the work. A V of stones points seaward. Fish ride the flood in like shoppers and discover on the ebb that the exits have become confusing. You wade out with spears and baskets when the water retreats, scooping, prodding, laughing when a wavelet outwits a hasty lunge. Nets braided from plant fiber join the toolkit monkey rope inner bark. Whatever can be teased into cord, and then into a mesh that catches more water than fish until your hands learn the right size for the day's quarry. Your palms earn a new map of calluses salty and proud. Cooking by the sea is theatre. You build a shallow pit and line it with hot stones until they glitter. Seaweed goes down first, a green mattress that steams like a friendly cloud when you lay shellfish and fish on it. More weed on top, then a blanket of sand. The beach breathes for you while the sea hisses approval. When you peel it back, everything smells like a story you'll tell later to people who weren't lucky enough to smell it. Shells open like applause. You eat with your hands dips of fingers into brine, and fat cheeks, shiny hearts steady. Tide teaches caution as well as generosity. Rogue waves pretend to be jokes until they aren't. You learn to keep one eye on the horizon, one on your work, and both on the children near the waterline. You never turn your back on a sea that enjoys surprises. You also learn about hunger. You can't taste red tides that turn water the wrong color and shellfish the wrong kind of quiet. On those days you step back, let the ocean keep its own counsel, and eat from shore or plain until the water remembers how to be friendly. Spears get a new education. In water thrusts must ignore the lie of refraction. The fish is not where your eye says it is. You aim a little low, a little forward, and trust the feel your hands acquire from 1,000 missed tries that become 100 hits. You keep shafts short enough to be nimble, and tips barbed just enough to hold what you don't want to argue with twice. A torch at night turns the shallows into a theatre of light and silhouettes. You take only what the tide can forgive, and the morning won't scold. Shelter shifts by the coast. Wind is a constant author editing your plans. You turn your roofs lower, your walls tighter, your fire pits tucked into elbows of stone where gusts can't steal the first spark. Driftwood arrives as gifts with unknown histories. You test each piece for rot, for worm, for splinter manners. Some you burn. Some you carve into hooks, pegs the frame of a drying rack where fish become tomorrow in strips. Moonwatching becomes a household job. Someone's eyes track nights from curved to round and back again. Springs and neaps make their own arithmetic. How far the sea will bow, how much rock will politely kneel. You build your traps where the regular low water leaves them dry, or you accept that storms will teach humility without being asked. A line of shells tied to a stick becomes a tide chime. When it sings, you start walking. New flavors join your memory. Sea lettuce brightens stews like green lightning. Kelp thickens soups into winter kind. Urchin roe is a concentrated sunrise if you share fairly. Salt dries on your lips and in bowls where you boil brine to crystals under a patient sun. With salt meat from the plain walks farther into the future without complaint. The coast and the interior shake hands in your packs. The sea is also a road. On calm days you lash logs and reeds into rafts, ride short along-shore hops like cautious birds, never out of sight of the beach your feet trust. You learn to watch swell sets, to read wind cat's foot patterns, to let a paddle bite water with respect. You do not hurry your courage, you let skill stack until courage becomes simply another word for practice. At night, the surf breath is a lullaby without an end. It smooths edges off your thoughts, the way it smooths stones into pockets. Firelight gilds the curve of shell piles that rise behind camp like small white hills, middens that will tell future eyes how long you loved this place. A pup sprawls between feet. A child mutters tide tables in sleep. You draw a map in wet sand with a stick here, the trap here, the weed bed here, the path to the fresh water seep behind the dunes. The next wave erases it, which is fine. The map lives in your hands now. You fall asleep with salt in your hair, and the sense that the world keeps many kitchens. Plains fed you with heat and patient legs. The coast feeds you with clocks and stones and the moon's old tug. Tomorrow you'll wake to gull complaints and choose again when to enter the foaming market and when to stand on dry ground and watch. Both are hunting. Both are home. The tide goes out. Your eyes go in. The tide comes in. Your belly nods. The sea keeps breathing. So do you. The plain is an honest stage. Long sightlines heat for a metronome, but some days the hunt asks for curtains. You walk into the green places where visibility becomes a rumor, reed beds clattering with secret wind, thorn thickets knit like stubborn cloth. Oxbow pools the color of old tea. Here patience is not a pause, it's the whole plan. The river teaches you its manners first. You learn the regular fords the places hoof and paw, prefer where the bank slopes like a sigh, and the mud holds a print without swallowing a leg. Hippos carve their commuting lanes from water to grass, glossy trenches that glisten even at noon. Crocodiles pretend to be logs with opinions. You memorize their favorite ledges, warm shale shelves, undercut banks, the slow eddies where fish forget to be clever. You never step where you cannot see the bottom, and if you must, you probe with a long stick and a longer thought. Ambush begins days before a chase. You scout the green. You find the quiet alleys inside thickets where bodies can move without announcing themselves, where a spear point can travel straight instead of quarreling with vine. You map reed heights short where sand sneaks in taller where flood leaves gifts, and note the windy seams where movement is less suspicious because the plants are already talking. The river's bends become tools, a convex curve, to push against a concave pocket where panic tends to curl and hold its breath. You weave nets of people more than fiber. A line of walkers becomes a soft wall that nudges without shouting. Everyone knows their role before dawn, blockers, pressers, finishers, watchers. Blockers slip into the green early and disappear posted along the ghost paths you expect hooves to choose in surprise. Pressers begin far out, a crescent tightening like a patient hand. Finishers stand where geometry and water conspire to make indecision. Watchers watch everything, The wind, the birds, the sky that invents new plans without asking. Hand signs do most of the talking. A flat palm hold, 2 fingers split. A circling finger tighten the arc. A fist freeze. Words carry badly in green rooms. They bounce, they amplify, they tell the wrong ears the right ideas. Children stay back with elders who will teach them where to look, not yet where to stand. Pups, your wolf partners, work the edges where scent informs more quickly than sight. Their tails write updates the reeds cannot fake. You enter the reed bed bent at the waist, shoulders narrow spear held along your forearm so the point doesn't snag, and tell a story you don't want told. Feet find the old hippo steps because flat matters more than dry when silence is the goal. Your breath becomes smaller, contained a warm animal you keep in your chest instead of letting it roam. Dragonflies stitch bright threads between stalks. Frogs make ticking sounds like a clock you didn't set. The first nudge is gentle. A clap against your thigh, a stone tossed low into water where you know it will plop and become a suggestion. Sound moves differently over reed and river. It folds, it turns corners, it decides for panic. The herd impala today, by the neatness of tracks and the pepper smell left on grass, edges away from noise toward the path you prepared. The blockers unseen harden from people into posts not moving, not blinking, just being boundaries that didn't exist a breath ago. Panic always looks like speed, but it is really a search for rules. You give the herd a rule not here. The presses close another finger width. Body's eyes level, arms loose, no one chasing everyone present. The herd flows the way water chooses the low line. It reaches the bank where the mud remembers many mornings. A few brave ones step, test, commit. The rest follow because bravery is contagious, and so is uncertainty. Crocodiles are part of the math, and you never write sums you can't live with. This ford is shallow, gravel-bottomed fast water in mid-channel. No patient green pool where a smile hides. You chose it for that. 2 watchers upstream hold long poles to slap water if the wrong log decides to grow teeth. 1 watcher downstream owns the rule that says, if the river keeps the animal. The river keeps it, no one reaches after a bad decision. Safety isn't dramatic. It's boring on purpose. The first bodies splash through the herd, stretched into a ribbon that hums. Midway, one hesitates, the one you've read for 2 days in dew, and dung a slight drag on the right hind, a shorter stride. Hesitation is a snag. You move. Not far, not loud, 3 steps and a show of presence at the place where retreat would be easy. The animal chooses forward the choice you offered on purpose. It climbs the far bank into the small pocket of grass where finishers wait in shadow. Finishers don't pounce, they appear. 2 steps, 1 thrust a second to ensure the conversation ends cleanly. You don't litter the moment with glory. It's work. You thank quickly and start the other work watching. When herds are a poem, cats prefer the last lines. A lioness might have been reading this stanza too. Your watchers read the margins, the skybirds. No dust lifts where a chase would be. No oxpecker chorus tattles. Today your poem is yours to finish. You halt the presses, open the crescent. Let the unwounded river crossers find their own chapters again. A good ambush takes exactly what it came for and pays the land back with quiet. You do the fast things first. Bleed cool meat in shade, offload guts to ground with gratitude and distance from camp. The dogs take their earned share, not as charity, but as wages organs. You won't carry strips you cut thin and toss to the green edge. Their tails make little metronomes of completion. Transport is its own river. You wrap cuts in wet grass against heat, sling them from poles or shoulders so blood doesn't announce your route to every fly. The smallest shoulders carry the light, clean tools. The largest carry the awkward long bones that will become tomorrow's marrow. A pair peels off toward the water with baskets to fetch drink. Another pair scuffs out your footprints near the ford, not because you're hiding, but because tomorrow should begin from the beginning, not with your leftovers. Sometimes the green fights back. A thorn rakes a forearm. A reed edge writes a red line on a shin. A hidden hole twists an ankle and teaches humility. You carry strips of hide as ties ash for clots, a poultice leaf folded in your pouch because experience is a better packer than optimism. You never jump logs you haven't tested with a stick. You never step over a small channel without knowing where your second foot will land. You remind your body that falling in the green is less romantic than it sounds. Rivers rewrite themselves, and so must you. A storm upriver fattens the brown line to roaring. Your perfect ford is a boiling sentence with too many commas. Then you stay out and wait, and hunger is a different lesson. Or you pivot drive not to water, but to a narrow thicket between two old termite mounds, a dry funnel where the green pretends to be a river, and you can stage the same grammar without the wet teeth. Adaptation is not a brag, it's a habit. Evening leans in with cool hands. The green releases you like a breath it was holding. Back at the thorn ring, the pups collapse in a heap, still smelling of river gossip. Children chime questions shaped like the day. Why did the herd turn here and not there? How do you know which reeds are loud? You draw the answer in dust with a burnt stick, a crescent for the pressers, dots for blockers, a wavy line for wind, a small X where hesitation became harvest. The map smudges under a heel, and nobody minds, because the lines have already moved into eyes and wrists. You eat without hurry, the way people do who trust tomorrow, because they worked at it today. Fat tastes like applause after green work. Someone hums the river's low song. Someone else taps the reed rhythm on a rib bone. You look at your hands, small nicks a smear of mud in the lifeline, and feel the slow tide of tiredness come in. The river will be different in the morning. That's its promise and its warning. You bank the fire, listen to frogs argue about the moon, and sleep with the sound of brown water folding and unfolding the land like a blanket you share. You've lengthened your arm with a spear. Now you lengthen it again with a small piece of honesty called a lever. It starts as a joke in wood. A short board the length of your forearm with a peg or hook at one end. You fit the tail of a long, flexible dart onto that hook, draw your arm back, and feel the world offer extra room inside your shoulder. The throw that used to die at 50 long paces now hums alive at twice that with a flatter arc and a sound like a bird's wing remembering how to fly. You grin without meaning to. Leverage feels like cheating and also like fairness restored. The dart is not a heavy spear. It's a reed with ambition taller than you, springy patient. You fletch it with 3 feathers cut to match or 2, if that's what today's birds will spare their veins pared thin, so they guide without scolding. A stone or bone point seats into a foreshaft, then into the dart, so a hard hit can break the small part and spare the long one. Glue and sinew do their old duet. Balance sits forward of center, so the point is opinionated, but the shaft must bend and unbend like a fish to store and spend your energy. Too stiff and it dives. Too soft and it wobbles like a drunk mosquito. You learn each dart's voice. The thrower, the atlatl you don't call by any name, yet gets small refinements. A shallow groove along its top helps the tail seat. A wrist thong keeps it from flying off when excitement outruns grip. Some days you tie on a smooth weight near the middle, a pebble board and lashed, because the added mass smooths your release, lengthening the slow part of the throw, so the fast part arrives clean. You test both ways. You trust the way your shoulder speaks more than rules. Practice moves the miracle from surprise to habit. You stand at the edge of camp and throw at a ring of soot on a termite mound. First you miss high, then you miss left, then your hand and eye sign a treaty. Ankles, knees, hips, all in the same sentence. The thrower rides your palm like a small canoe. The dart leaves with a soft whoop, a word made of wind and intent. Children clap when the shaft quivers in the mound with its feathers whispering. You bow like a clown because showmanship keeps them watching while you embed the safer parts of the lesson, mind the hook. Never swing behind you without a shout. Points sleep in a basket until the hunt wakes them. Hunting with reach changes everything and demands new caution. You do not close to thorn-scratch distance with a boar if you don't have to. You do not ask a cat to argue from 3 spear lengths when you can ask it from 6. In the open, you and your partners become a pattern of throws and feints that keeps a target moving across ground you chose for footing, for wind, for what's behind it. If a shaft passes through and keeps telling a story you didn't mean to write. Finishers still carry thrusting spears for the last tidy line. But many endings arrive now at safer distances, clean and quick. Wolves learn the new choreography. A lifted thrower means be ready. The sky is about to help. A low thrower means hold circle, don't spook the angle. You stop thinking of the air as empty. It's a road you own in pieces. A partner on your left becomes a second lane. His throw chases your miss into usefulness, not waste. You keep 2 darts ready, one nocked, one cradled under the off arm, so rhythm doesn't stutter while the day is listening. The atlatl asks new fieldcraft too. Darts are long and argue with brush. In greenwork you carry them upright, tips down, tails up, like young trees you're shepherding. In riverwork you keep feathers dry, protecting them in leaf wraps until the last moment, so the guidance doesn't turn to paste. You learn to mend in the field a splint of slivered reed, a quick wrap of sinew, a kiss of heated glue, and a wobbling shaft becomes honest enough to finish the day. On broad flats you get brave in the correct direction distance, not swagger. You test range in wind, how a cross breeze nudges a shaft's long flank. How a headwind lifts it, how a tailwind steals from it. You start aiming not at bodies, but at futures, the place where a stride will end, the line where a turn begins. When you are wrong cleanly with enough space to admit it and try again. When you are right, the dart arrives with the soft authority of a well-told truth. The tool reshapes camp life in small ways that add up. Darts sleep in a rack near the fire, where rising warm air keeps feathers from damp sulking. Children get light, blunt-headed practice shafts and a quota of allowable brag. Elders take to coaching from shade-saving shoulders while spending wisdom. Your hands acquire a new set of calluses, a crescent where the thrower's edge kisses your palm, a shiny patch on the thumb where you press the tail home without splitting it. Stories adjust as stories do. Boasts measure in spans of ground now, from the red termite hill to the flat rock, says someone, and the circle hums because they know that distance and the day the wind made it more dramatic than it sounds. Songs count in darts, not just in steps. A good hunt sometimes ends with no one wet past the knees, no one scratched to the elbow. You don't love the land less for making it less dangerous. You love it more for teaching you to ask it better questions. When the moon is right and the tide low on coastal days, a throw from a bank into a school in the shallows, wins supper with science and timing. When the grass is high on river days, a flick through a channel you carved with patience lands a shaft where a spear would have argued with reeds. On the wide stony pan on plain days, the atlatl turns a wary herd into a geometry you can solve with fewer risks and cleaner endings. At night, your shoulder talks to you, not in pain exactly, but in a language of usedness you translate as more strength tomorrow. You rub fat and ash into the skin and roll the joint in slow circles while someone tells a story that is definitely about a lion and definitely about you, but also safely about a cousin. Pride sits where it belongs near the back of the circle, smiling, not interrupting. The lever sits by your sleeping mat like a small promise. It's simple, humble, and ridiculous in how much it does. You made length from almost nothing, wood and a notch, and that length keeps your people closer to tomorrow. You curl around the thought and let sleep take the tools out of your hands so your dreams can throw for a while. Fire turned night into time. Now dust and pigment turn memory into a place you can point to. You pick up a black stick of charcoal and a clot of red earth you ground on a flat stone with a little water and fat. Ochre ash clay, the plain's soft grammar. A cave wall, a rock shelter, even a smoothed slab leaned against a tree becomes a page. You don't draw because you're bored. You draw because the hunt keeps happening in your head after the meat is hung, and you need your hands to help your eyes finish the thought. Fingers make a line, and the line starts running. A back curves the way a back does when a herd decides to accept water and keep one eye on the reeds. Legs stack properly under weight. A head tilts at the angle you remember right before a turn. It seems like magic, but it's only practice paying rent in public. Children gather like sparks. You sketch hooves as two soft crescents, not triangles, and show how pressure flattens them at speed. You crosshatch a patch on a flank and say, "Here is where the spear lives if the wind is from here." You make tiny arrows of air to show how scent flows around bodies depending on the hour. Someone laughs when you draw a line of small circles to represent the sound of flies, then hushes when they realize it helps their mind hear the scene. You add motion without moving. A series of legs faint to bold says stride. A curve trailing a dart says flight. A cloud of dots behind a hoof says dust. You discover that a smear with the heel of your hand can turn a crisp outline into speed. Your palm becomes a brush. Your knuckles stamp manes. You press your own hand against the rock and blow a fine mist of ochre around it, leaving a bright negative proof that a body stood here and learned something worth leaving. A younger hand fits inside the ghost of yours. This is teaching, but it also feels like ceremony you don't need a name for. Not all pictures are prey. You draw wind lines that curl and hook around a hill. You draw water ripples across a ford, a twirl where an undercut bank waits for an ankle. You draw the positions for tomorrow's ambush, the crescent, the blockers, the finishers, and the dogs. As small triangles with tails when you run out of patience for ears. You mark the place where last season's burn made young grass, the place where a cat likes to fold itself into shadow at noon. The map lives in heads. The wall lets the heads synchronize. Pigments have their own habits. Red ochre grips rock like it was born to. Charcoal is bolder, but smears at a touch. White from ground bone shows best in the dark pockets near the ceiling. You carry a little kit, a bundle of sticks, a leather pouch of powders, a polished pebble to burnish lines so they don't shed when curious fingers test them. You don't guard the images, you maintain them. When rain fingers the lower wall, you move the lesson higher. When smoke darkens a panel, you scratch fresh where the stone is still pale. The wall is a living notebook, not a shrine you fear. Night makes the pictures breathe. Firelight climbs and falls, and the animals seem to move if you stare long enough. A dart you drew at dusk appears to fly when the flame leans. A running line of hoof churn dances as shadows wiggle across it. Someone begins to drum a slow heartbeat on a hollow log. Someone else hums the two-note call you use to signal a quiet push in reeds. Practice becomes rehearsal. Rehearsal becomes dream. When you step into morning, your body has already been there. The wall keeps other things too. You mark first hunts with little signs. Only your circle understands 3 dots for the one who carried the water, a tiny feather for the first clean throw. A healed wound gets a tally with a notch for gratitude. A death rare but real earns a set of hands pressed close, a ring of breath around emptiness. You don't explain these to outsiders. You don't even fully explain them to each other. The telling is in the doing. Sometimes the wall holds jokes. A hyena drawn with ridiculous ears, a friend sketched mid-trip over a route that every foot in camp knows. Laughter stitches fear into something wearable. The children copy the jokes first, then between giggles copy the serious things with the same careful hands. You praise both. Joy and accuracy are cousins. Art changes the hunt in a way you can feel but can't weigh. You notice more during the day because your hand wants material for the night. You run straighter lines because your mind has a clean picture of where the bends are. You stand where you stood in a drawing, and the real horizon matches the drawn one, and your feet relax as if they're on familiar ground. Memory gets a handle you can grab under stress. You learn what to leave off. Too much detail turns the wall into bragging. The point is the mouth of a valley, not the hairs on a muzzle. A single line that captures a sway tells more truth than 1,000 careful scratches. You strip the scene to its questions: wind path, timing, angle. The wall answers in red and black and white. Your body translates. One evening a storm pens the camp in a cave where the ceiling is low and the floor is kind. The fire whispers. The rain talks loud. You draw a river bend you've never hunted, news from a cousin. Rumor from birds, the shape of a bank, the wind described to your nose. You study the drawing like a stranger's face until it becomes a friend's. When the storm moves on and the plain rinses clean, you go find that bend. It looks exactly like a stone told you it would. The throw you make that day started as a mark in soot. Before sleep, you look at the wall one more time. Hands, hooves, wind, water. A map of what you've learned and what you hope to learn next. You bank the coals and let the animals on the rock keep running while your lids fall. The night practices without you. Your dreams catch up, feet light on dust that remembers everything. In the morning you will add one line, or erase one, or only look. All 3 are work. All 3 are art. Cold is a teacher with short sentences. Step wrong, and it explains things you will remember forever. You answer by dressing your body in longer stories, layer on layer, until the wind has to read you like a book. You begin with skin. The fur you scrape, stretch, and smoke stops being an animal and becomes whether you can wear. You think in layers, an inner shirt of soft hide turned furrin for warmth, a mid-layer that holds heat, but breathes an outer shell greased with fat to shrug off wet. Stitching is a quiet miracle. A sliver of bone drill die at one end, polished like a tooth, becomes a needle. Sinew teased into thread shrinks as it dries, tightening every seam as if the garment remembered to exhale. You cut patterns by memory, the curve that spares the armpit from chafing the gusset, that lets a knee kneel without inviting a draft. A hood lined with wolf ruff turns wind aside from your cheeks as if manners were contagious. You invite soot under your eyes to tame glare and carry a strip of rawhide to bite when wind wants to steal your breath. Boots get special attention. Double soles stuffed with dry grass that you change before it remembers the last step too well. Laces that tie over the ankle to keep snow from auditioning for houseguest. Mitts are attached by cords so you can drop them to work and not have the land adopt them immediately. Nothing you wear is just clothing. It's a conversation with air that forgot how to be kind. Hunting in cold rewrites your steps. Reindeer pour across white like spilled seed. You read their passage in flecks of hair on willow twigs, in cropped lichen, in the hard polish of a well-used crossing. Snow becomes a canvas for pressure release stories, edges crisper than dust ever offered. Wind carves sastrugi ridges that can twist an ankle or hide your line until the last footfall. You let the ridges be your allies, moving where their shadows make you a rumor, not a silhouette. Breath must be managed like firewood. You keep it small, and even so, ice doesn't bloom into a betraying cloud at the wrong moment. Tools adapt as fast as fingers can think. Darts get lighter but longer, fletched with feathers you dry above the hearth smoke, so they don't sulk in damp. Points are tailored to the day. Broad for thin-hide deer, barbed and toggled for seal or fish under ice. A toggling harpoon head bone, shaped to sit flat. Going in and turn sideways when you pull makes a line and a life insurance policy the same thing. Lines are braided from gut and sinew rubbed with fat to remain patient in cold. You carry a small awl to mend in the field. An unmended loop is an apology waiting to happen. Ambush becomes architecture. On migration days, you build guiding wings of brush and snow. Blocks a soft funnel that suggests rather than compels a path toward a narrow place. You choose crossings where ice is thick and honest test with a pole and a prayer, and post watchers whose only job is to watch the watchers wind skybirds, because cold turns small mistakes into loud ones. Wolves, thick-furred and gleaming with winter pride, read your plan and add theirs, flanking along willow belts, holding the back door closed with low, thrumming growls that vibrate in your ribs. The atlatl sends its long punctuation across still air that makes distance feel like a taut string. Shelter is science wrapped in tradition. A snow house cut blocks glinting like stacked moonlight turns minus a lot into something survivable with your own breath and a small lamp. The entrance tunnels down so cold must climb to find you, and often loses interest. Roof arched to shed its own weight, wall seams sealed with snow's sticky side, a vent hole that stays open under watch so the lamp's song doesn't steal air. In tree country, a lean-to angled against a spruce wall drinks heat from a long fire and returns it with a smile. You hang wet mitts near, but not over the flames. Carry them under your shirt when you must, because dry is a religion, and its rituals are strict. Food is fuel with a schedule. Fat moves up the list from delicious to mandatory. Marrow you once treated as a treat becomes arithmetic. Blubber is a savings account you spend with gratitude. You freeze meat in slabs that turn hard as stone and shave it into mouth-sized snowflakes with a sharp flake or a small adze. Berries trapped by the quick hand of frost reappear in midwinter soups like bright jokes. A stone lamp, whale oil, or bear fat feeding a thick moss wick puts light and heat and cooking in the same breath. You stir stews with a stick that starts to smell like family. Sound travels differently over winter. Hooves drumming snow through still air can reach you from a hill you cannot yet see. You learn the trouble with quiet, that you are part of it. Leather squeaks will rat you out, so you rub seams with fat. Snow squeals under cold soles, so you scuff a little dirt into treads before a close approach. A raven's single clack can mean wolves at work or people with ideas. You listen for the difference and thank the bird, either way with a bit of offal when the day is done. Cold also offers gifts. Rivers harden into roads. You drag loads on sleds made from bent saplings shod in ice. You melt and refreeze smooth as logic. A wind that would kill a naked thought fills a hide sail and pulls your haul without complaint. You learn to trust the moan of good ice and to flinch from the hollow drum of a liar. Aurora writes green sentences across midnight. The wolves answer in chords. Your chest vibrates with the old echo of being part of a choir that includes sky. Inside winter makes time. Hands that hunted all autumn now shape bone and antler into points and needles finer than fairness, Carve spear throwers with animals whose backs fit your palm like fate twist cord weave mats, sew boots that remember the measure of your steps. Elders tell roots disguised as stories, jokes that are maps if you tilt your head, warnings tucked in laughter. Children practice knot magic until their fingers can tie by feel in mitts. You underpin everything with the unglamorous rhythm of maintenance, scrape smoke, mend, sharpen, pack, rotate food caches. So the far corner of hunger never gets an invitation. Spring will come a messy extravagance of melt and mud. For now you live where breath blooms and freezes on a hood, where a kiss of wind can tell you more than a horizon ever could. Cold is not an enemy, it is a narrow doorway. Your fur and patience make you small enough to fit big enough to bring everyone through. The hunt ends when the animal falls, the meal begins when the story starts. Between those two is the web that keeps a small band from unraveling in a big world. Sharing is not charity, it's infrastructure. A carcass arrives dragged, carried, floated on a pole between shoulders, and the camp's center changes shape. You sort cuts by speed, liver, and heart to those who need iron, and now. Soft fat to elders who knit nights into tomorrows. Sweet bits to the children, so their first memories of meat taste like belonging. Hunters do not eat first. They eat last enough to remember why they hunted. The wolves take their pay in viscera and trimmings with good manners learned the same way you learned hand signals in repetition and praise. Who gets what is old law written without writing? New mothers' bowls fill before young brags do. The hunter who came back empty 2 days running puts a share into someone else's hand anyway, because next week your luck may trade places. Reputation is measured less in kills than in consistency. Who carries water without being asked who cleans tools after, without being told who distributes fat fairly when eyes are most hungry. Your circle knows the difference between generosity and theater. One feeds winter, the other feeds ego, and then leaves you cold. Debt isn't numbers, it's memory. A dried strip pressed into your palm on a lean day tastes like a promise you will keep when your own bag is heavy. A babysitter at the fire buys a morning on the track for a mother who needs to move. An elder's story about a ford that looks safe but eats ankles is a deposit you repay later with the hide awl you carved just right for her hand. There's no ledger, but there is a ledger kept in glances and in songs that remember who stepped forward when the wind blew hard. Work you can't see still counts. A pot watcher keeps stew from becoming a charcoal biography. A hide scraper makes tomorrow's warmth. A joke teller keeps a camp from cracking under quiet fear after a close call. The child who chases pups away from the drying rack saves meat you would have lost. The aunt who teaches that child how to tie a better knot saves a future day you don't yet know will need saving. You say thank you in the language of tasks, an extra armful of wood by someone's sleeping mat. A repaired strap left where a hand will find it in morning grey. Stories are the camp's nervous system. They carry signals from danger, from memory, from possible futures. You don't have courts. You have tales about the time someone lied, and the river taught them manners about the day a share skipped a bowl, and a wolf's growl made the correction. Everyone else was too tired to voice. Laughter is a teacher with sharp teeth wrapped in wool. Children learn the boundaries not by scolding, but by seeing where heroes fall down, and why, where fools stumble, and how, where kindness grows taller than pride. Language fattens around the fire. You find words for wind that comes smelling of cat, for snow that whispers, and for snow that shouts, for a hungered look that needs food, and for a hungry look that needs a friend to sit closer. You invent names for your tools that stick good lyre for a fire that looks hot, but isn't. Skystring for the clear cold that pulls sound far. You discover the efficiency of metaphors. You don't need to repeat the entire river lesson if you can say the brown pocket and everyone sees the undercut bank with their mind's feet. Trade begins not with strangers but with cousins who camp near different stones. They bring shells from a coast the horizon forgot to tell you about. You give ochre that paints truer than theirs. Somebody's aunt knows a grandmother 2 valleys over whose glue never fails. You send a young one to learn the recipe, and he returns with resin ash and a story about bees that will sweeten the next winter. A net travels one way, a song travels the other. Both are currency, both are wealth. Rules arise because temptation does. Meat smells like an argument if you let it. You head disputes off early and often sideways. 2 men bristle. An elder hands them each a dull scraper and a big hide and says, "Make this soft by sundown." Somewhere between fiber and blisters, the heat leaves the words they were planning to waste. A shy theft happens. A gentle shaming follows. Someone tells the story of the time a hyena taught the camp about taking more than your share and lying about it. Laughter rebalances the scale. The bowl is filled for the one who needs it. The hand that took learns the feel of being seen and chooses better next time. Children are not the future. They are the present that will decide what the future can be. You put tools in their hands, early safe ones first, sharp ones under watch, and let them fail. Where failure costs nothing, you teach them to listen for birds and for boredom. You give them tiny real jobs with edges. Count the darts. The number must be the same at sunrise and at sleep. Their spines straighten under trust, because trust is a coat that fits only when someone measures you and then remembers your size. Sleep is communal, not in a tangle necessarily, but in the agreement that someone is always awake while someone else isn't. Watches rotate like the stars. Nobody hogs the easy hours 2 nights in a row. The watcher hums, low keeps coals, honest taps a foot when the wolves sing, so their music doesn't carry him away. He is not less a hunter because his spear lies by the door while his ears hold the camp safe. He is the bridge you cross in your dreams to morning. When the circle is tight, luck looks like skill, and skill looks like magic. But underneath it is only practice, braided with promises. Meat is the excuse. Stories are the scaffolding. Debt, the good kind, the kind that tastes like gratitude, is the mortar. You fall asleep hearing the day turned into sentences that will still be true when the snow forgets your footprints. The last thing you see before the lid closes is a hand pass a bowl to a smaller hand, and then the bowl come back later, filled by someone who was watching when you weren't. That is civilization enough for tonight. Fields arrive the way weather does, slow, then suddenly everything is a different color. You wake one day, and a cousin's camp is not moving. Seeds have become an argument that persuades feet to stay. At first it's a hedge against lean seasons, a patch scratched into floodplain silt where last year's dropped grains sprouted fat and unafraid. Someone notices that trampling around the patch makes weeds think twice, and that ash from a fire makes stalks stand proud. A fence of thorn turns browsing into a negotiation and keeps the goats honest when they forget. You still hunt, still fish, still visit the coast when the moon's clock says feast, but a part of your hunger is now planted, not chased. Staying teaches new dangers and new comforts. Predators learn the map of you. You answer with better fences with dogs that now have day jobs as well as night songs. Disease tries a new language in bodies that sleep near animals. You learn the hygiene of distance and the quiet clinic of boiling water, because a grandmother insists and is always right. Food piles up the way trouble used to. Storage becomes an art pit lined with bark and sealed with clay. Baskets smeared with resin, fish hung and smoked like thoughts saved for winter. Time once measured by hooves and tides acquires a second clock. Seasons of planting, weeding, guarding, harvest. You keep both clocks because forgetting either makes you poor in different ways. You read the sky for rain as you always did, and now you also read the soil for thirst. Children learn to tell the wind that carries fire for a burn from the wind that carries pollen for a field. New words grow furrow-sheaf stubble, and you smile at how they feel in your mouth, how they taste like work you can see from camp. Tools lean differently against the wall. The atlatl still sleeps there, and spears too, but next to them stand digging sticks with stone-capped heads and hoes with blades ground from scapula. A new rhythm gets into your shoulders, uproot and toss, bend and rise. The old rhythm never leaves. Some mornings you vanish into reeds again because wild meat is more than calories. It is a language your body refuses to forget. You hunt less often maybe, but not worse. The wolves, some still wild, some camp wild, range the fence lines at dusk and return smelling of stories you can still read. Art changes walls, and walls change art. Instead of only caves, houses collect images, spirals that could be seeds or rivers. Tally marks that count sacks or moons. Hands again, always hands pressed around doorposts like family names. The map of the valley gets drawn in longer lines. Distant cousins become regular visitors. Paths beaten not just by feet, but by expectation. Trade thickens into roads of obligation and joy, pots that hold water like a promise, stones from a far ridge that make better edges, a song to sing while threshing that keeps wrists in time and tempers from fraying. You notice a strange new feeling one morning while you watch the goats chew the field's outskirts, homesickness, while you are home. It's not a complaint. It's an echo. You miss the telephone wire hum of the plane at noon, the library hush of dew-dusted dust, the way a waterhole's rim wrote everyone's name every morning. You step to the edge of the field and read the ditch for fox prints just to reassure yourself the world still keeps records outside your fence. It does. You breathe easier. Not all staying is gentle. The first harvest attracts more than gratitude. Strangers arrive with empty hands and mouths that make promises. You remember the old law, share wisely, not lazily, and the old posture, back, straight voice, calm, spear, visible, but bored. You invent new rituals to replace the traveling ones your feet used to perform, automatically a feast after the first sheaf. A day when the field rests, and you visit the river with nothing but lunch and long glances. Ceremonies are calendars in costume. You pin the year in place with them so your heart knows where it is. Sleep arranges itself around new sounds. Instead of frogs and reed wind every night, you hear goat bells talk across dark, and the hollow thrum of grain beating like rain reversed. Fire still owns a corner of the room, held in a clay bowl or a stone circle that has learned your family names. Above it a pot hangs not only with stew, but sometimes with dye or pitch for mending the roof. Work doesn't stop because the world turned domestic. It changes its shoes. You do not outgrow the hunt. You archive it in muscle and in ritual. When a child comes of an age, you take them out where dawn still happens all at once. No fence, no roofline, only horizon collecting light. You let them stand in the old listening ears to birds' nose to dust eyes, soft until the ground begins to talk. You show the old throws at safe targets, the old reeds in new tracks. You hand them a coal when you return and say, "This is from there." They hold it like a seed. One day later, sooner always, you will walk a last wild morning. That is not the last wild morning for the world, only the last one before you have to weed. You will watch a line of antelope cross at the usual notch, and your throat will tighten for no dramatic reason. You will thank them for being beautiful and for letting your people practice being human on their good legs and sharp eyes. You will go home and grind grain, and tell the child who asks what the antelope looked like, and you will draw it on the wall with ochre that still remembers fire. Night folds the fields and the old plain into the same dark. You sit by your fire and lay out your tools like a biography, the thrower, the needle, the hoe, the basket. Your wolves sigh. Your children sleep with straw in their hair. The stars write their familiar impatience. The moon lifts its old clock. You are not farther from your ancestors. You are at their table adding a dish. You close your eyes knowing that in the morning you will either run or weed or both, and that either way you will eat because attention became skill. Skill became culture, and culture became comfort. You can share. You sleep. The last thing you hear is the plain still talking under the stubble, saying the same thing it has always said. Listen, decide, share, try again.